Think Austria is just about Mozart and mountains? Well, you won't believe what I discovered when I dug deeper. Wait until you find out that Austria can literally confiscate your car forever just for speeding, or that there's a law controlling the price of dried fruit. Here's the scary part. Some of these facts will completely change how you see this Alpine nation. Number 15. Austria can permanently steal your car if you speed too much. Since March 2024, Austria introduced what might be the world's most extreme anti-speeding law. You heard right. If you exceed the speed limit by more than 60 kilometers per hour in populated areas or 70 kilometers per hour on highways, police don't just fine you, they confiscate your vehicle permanently and can even transfer ownership to the state. Think a simple speeding ticket? Think again. Within the first week of this law's implementation, dozens of cars were already seized in Vienna, Tyrol, and Carinthia. Picture this. You're driving your brand new BMW through Vienna, running late for a meeting, and suddenly you're walking home because your car now belongs to Austria. The law applies to everyone, tourists, residents, even diplomats. One moment you own a $50,000 vehicle, the next moment the Austrian government does. This makes Austria's roads some of the most dangerous places in the world to have a lead foot, turning what would be a traffic ticket elsewhere into permanent property loss. Number 14. There's an official government law that controls how much you can charge for apricots. Austria has a bizarre price control system specifically for apricots called Marilyn locally, along with other dried fruits. Sounds unbelievable, but Austrian law literally sets maximum prices that vendors can charge for these fruits. You heard right. The government decides what an apricot should cost, not market forces. This law exists because apricots hold special cultural significance in Austria, particularly in the Wachau Valley region where they've been cultivated since Roman times. Imagine opening a fruit stand in Vienna and having bureaucrats tell you exactly what price tag to put on your produce. The fine for overcharging can reach hundreds of euros per violation. What makes this even more surreal is that while you can freely price luxury items like jewelry or cars, the moment you touch an apricot, Big Brother, Austria steps in. This creates the bizarre situation where a single apricot has more government oversight than a bottle of champagne. Number 13. You can get a 5,000 euro fine for calling a government official Little Hitler, but only 20 euros for calling someone an arse. Austria's insult laws operate on a sliding scale of bureaucratic sensitivity that would make your head spin. Here's the scary part. The same word can cost you vastly different amounts depending on who you're insulting. Call your neighbor an offensive name during a parking dispute, that's just a modest fine. But if you direct that same energy toward a government employee, suddenly you're facing a bill that could pay for a decent used car. Wait until you find out that Austrian courts actually have detailed price lists for different categories of insults, like a twisted menu of verbal offenses. The law specifically protects public officials from comparisons to historical figures, which explains why the Little Hitler reference carries such a massive penalty. Picture getting into a heated argument with a traffic cop and accidentally letting slip the wrong historical comparison. Suddenly you're not just dealing with a traffic ticket but a fine that could wipe out months of savings. This system essentially creates two classes of citizens, those who can be insulted cheaply and those whose feelings are worth 250 times more according to Austrian law. Number 12. It's illegal to wear swimwear anywhere except designated swimming areas, even during 40-degree heat waves. While the rest of Europe relaxes dress codes during scorching summer temperatures, Austria maintains strict anti-swimwear laws that can catch tourists completely off guard. You heard right. Step outside a pool, lake, or designated beach area in your bikini or swim trunks, and you're breaking the law, even if the pavement is literally melting. This law is especially enforced in cities like Vienna and Salzburg, where summer temperatures regularly soar above 35 degrees. Think you can cool off by wearing minimal clothing while walking through the city? Think again. Austrian police actively patrol tourist areas looking for visitors who don't understand this cultural taboo. The fine can reach several hundred euros, turning your attempt to beat the heat into an expensive mistake. Picture this surreal scene. Tourists sweltering in full clothing during a heat wave while just meters away, people in swimwear cool off in designated areas. What makes this law particularly cruel is that Austria experiences some of Europe's most intense summer heat, yet maintains one of its strictest public decency codes. Foreign visitors often discover this rule the hard way, receiving fines that can cost more than their entire vacation budget. Number 11. Piano tuning after midnight is a criminal offense with specific legal penalties. Austria takes noise pollution so seriously that they've created laws governing the exact hours when musical instruments can be maintained. Wait until you find out that professional piano tuners must schedule their work around these bizarre time restrictions or face legal consequences. The law exists because piano tuning involves repeatedly striking keys and using metal tools that create distinctive sounds that carry through Austria's typically thin apartment walls. Sounds unbelievable, but Austrian apartment dwellers have successfully sued their neighbors for late-night piano maintenance, establishing legal precedent that makes this a real criminal matter. Picture being a professional piano tuner working on a concert grand for the Vienna Philharmonic and having to stop mid-job because the clock strikes midnight. Suddenly, your skilled profession becomes illegal until morning. This law creates a parallel universe where the same action that's considered artistic maintenance during the day becomes criminal noise pollution at night. The penalty isn't just a warning. Violators face fines and potential criminal charges for disturbing the peace. Austria's musical heritage, ironically, has created some of the world's most restrictive laws about when music-related activities can occur. Number 10. Austria is the only country where Red Bull originated, but locals prefer a completely different energy drink. Here's the mind-blowing part. While Red Bull generates billions in global revenue and was invented in Austria by Dietrich Mateschitz, the average Austrian actually consumes less Red Bull per capita than Americans or Germans. You heard right. The country that created the world's most successful energy drink barely drinks it themselves. Instead, Austrians prefer local alternatives and traditional coffee culture that dates back centuries. Wait until you find out that Mateschitz actually got the idea from a Thai energy drink called Krating Dang and modified it for Western tastes, meaning Austria's most famous export isn't even originally Austrian. The irony runs deeper. Red Bull's headquarters in Fuschel am See employs thousands of Austrians who spend their days marketing a product their own neighbors largely ignore. Picture walking through any Austrian supermarket and finding Red Bull competing for shelf space with local energy drinks that most foreigners have never heard of. This creates the bizarre situation where Austria profits massively from global energy drink addiction while maintaining one of Europe's strongest traditional coffee cultures. The company's Austrian employees often joke that they're more successful selling to New Yorkers than to their own families. Red Bull's global dominance makes Austria millions in tax revenue, yet the product remains curiously foreign in its own homeland, like an adopted child that became famous abroad while being overlooked at home. Number 9. Vienna has been declared the world's most livable city 11 times, but it has some of the strictest shop closing laws on earth. Think Vienna's quality of life rankings mean convenient shopping? Think again. Austrian law mandates that most shops must close by 7 p.m. on weekdays and remain completely closed on Sundays, creating a shopping desert that would drive Americans insane. You heard right. In this most livable city, you literally cannot buy basic necessities like groceries, clothing, or household items for 36 consecutive hours every weekend. Here's the scary part. If you run out of milk, medicine, or even toilet paper on Sunday, your only options are tiny gas station convenience stores with limited selection and prices that can be 300% higher than regular stores. Wait until you find out that this law is so strict that even tourist areas in central Vienna become ghost towns on Sundays, with visitors wandering empty streets looking for anything open besides restaurants. Picture being a tourist in this world's best city and discovering that your hotel is surrounded by closed shops while you desperately need basic supplies. The law creates a weekly economic paralysis that costs Austria billions in potential revenue, while forcing residents to plan their lives around arbitrary shopping schedules like it's still medieval times. Even pharmacies have limited Sunday hours, meaning minor health emergencies can become major inconveniences. This makes Vienna simultaneously the world's most livable city, and honestly one of the most inconvenient places to actually live when you need something outside business hours. Number 8. Austria has a secret gender ratio crisis that creates a dating nightmare for heterosexual women. While official statistics show relatively balanced gender ratios nationally, certain regions of Austria have developed severe gender imbalances that would shock you. You heard right. Some Austrian Alpine regions have up to 130 men for every 100 women, creating dating scenes that resemble mining boomtowns from the American Wild West. Here's the scary part. This isn't accidental, but the result of economic policies that attract male-dominated industries like construction, mining, and agriculture to rural areas while pushing women towards cities for education and service jobs. Wait until you find out that some Austrian villages have practically no single women left, forcing men to use dating apps with search radiuses of over 200 kilometers just to find potential partners. Think Austrian mountain towns or romantic retreats? Think again. They're often desperate bachelor pads where men outnumber women so severely that local festivals literally import women from neighboring countries for social events. Picture entire communities where the local bar looks like a men's club because there simply aren't enough women to create normal social dynamics. This has created a bizarre internal migration pattern where Austrian women flee rural areas not just for career opportunities, but to escape overwhelming male attention and social pressure. Some regions have become so male-dominated that they offer financial incentives to attract female residents, essentially paying women to move there and balance the population. The situation has become so extreme that Austrian sociologists study these areas as examples of how economic policy can accidentally destroy community social structures. Number 7. There's a law requiring you to pay TV license fees even if you don't own a TV or watch Austrian television. Austria's broadcasting tax system operates on the assumption that every household potentially benefits from public media, creating a Kafkaesque legal nightmare for residents. You heard right. Even if you've never owned a television, never watched Austrian broadcasts, and stream everything online from foreign services, you still owe the government annual fees for public broadcasting services you don't use. Here's the mind-blowing part. The burden of proof falls on you to demonstrate that you don't consume any Austrian media content, which is nearly impossible in the digital age since even accidental exposure to Austrian news websites could theoretically qualify as media consumption. Wait until you find out that Austrian media inspectors have legal authority to enter homes and inspect for any devices capable of receiving broadcast signals, including smartphones, computers, and even car radios. Think you can avoid this by claiming you only watch Netflix? Think again. The law assumes that any internet-connected device could potentially access Austrian content, making virtually every modern household liable for these fees. Picture trying to prove to government bureaucrats that your smartphone has never accidentally loaded an Austrian news article, or that your computer has never cached Austrian media content. The annual fee can exceed €300, making it more expensive than many streaming services that people actually want. This creates the surreal situation where Austrians pay mandatory fees for public television while increasingly consuming private streaming content from other countries, essentially subsidizing media they've chosen not to watch. Number 6. Austrian restaurants are legally required to provide free tap water, but, many refuse and face zero consequences. Despite clear laws mandating that restaurants must serve free tap water upon request, the enforcement of this regulation is so weak that most establishments simply ignore it without penalty. You heard right? Austria has consumer protection laws that sound progressive on paper but crumble the moment you try to use them in real life. Here's the scary part. Austrian tap water is actually among the world's cleanest and safest, often superior to expensive bottled water, yet restaurants routinely charge €3 to €5 for water while illegally refusing free alternatives. Wait until you find out that tourist areas in Vienna and Salzburg have developed sophisticated systems for avoiding this law, training staff to claim technical problems with tap water, or simply pretending not to understand the legal requirement. Think you can demand your legal right to free water? Think again. Most restaurants will reluctantly comply only after extended arguments, making every dining experience a potential legal battle over basic hydration. Picture sitting in a Salzburg restaurant dying of thirst, with legal rights to free water but facing a server who acts like you're requesting something impossible while selling you marked-up bottled water from the same municipal supply. The lack of enforcement has created a culture where laws exist primarily for show while businesses operate under different rules. Austrian consumer protection advocates estimate that restaurants collectively earn millions annually by violating this law, essentially creating an illegal tax on thirst that disproportionately affects budget-conscious tourists and locals. This transforms what should be a basic human right into a daily negotiation with service workers who profit from legal violations. Number 5. Austria operates a parallel universe rental market where landlords can legally discriminate based on nationality, age, and lifestyle preferences. While most European countries have strict anti-discrimination housing laws, Austria maintains rental regulations that would be considered blatantly illegal in neighboring Germany or Switzerland. You heard right. Austrian landlords can openly refuse tenants based on their country of origin, age, profession, or personal lifestyle choices without facing any legal consequences. Here's the mind-blowing part. Classified rental advertisements in Austria routinely specify only Austrian nationals, no foreigners, couples preferred, or no musicians, creating a housing market that operates like it's still the 1950s. Wait until you find out that even highly qualified EU citizens with stable jobs and excellent credit can be systematically rejected from hundreds of apartments simply because of their passport color, forcing them into expensive temporary housing while Austrian citizens access the same properties easily. Think European Union membership guarantees equal housing rights? Think again. Austria has negotiated special exemptions that allow this discrimination to continue legally, creating a two-tier housing system where citizenship determines access to quality homes. Picture browsing Austrian rental websites and seeing advertisements that explicitly exclude entire nationalities, professions, or demographic groups. Discrimination so blatant, it would trigger lawsuits in most Western countries. This system has created Vienna's paradoxical situation where the city ranks as the world's most livable, while simultaneously operating one of Europe's most discriminatory housing markets. The result is a rental market where landlords wield unprecedented power to shape neighborhood demographics based on personal prejudices, effectively allowing private citizens to enforce unofficial segregation policies. Foreign residents often spend months in expensive hotels or temporary accommodations while navigating this discriminatory landscape, turning Vienna's affordable housing reputation into a cruel joke for anyone without an Austrian passport. Austria has a secret military draft that applies to male citizens living anywhere in the world, including those who've never set foot in the country. Austrian military service laws create a global citizenship trap that can destroy lives and careers without warning, affecting Austrian men regardless of where they were born or raised. You heard right. If you're a male with Austrian citizenship through ancestry, birth, or naturalization, you're legally obligated to complete military service or civilian alternative service, even if you've lived your entire life in America, Canada, or Australia, and have never visited Austria. Here's the terrifying part. Austrian authorities can issue international arrest warrants for draft dodgers, meaning a routine trip to Europe for business or vacation can result in immediate detention and forced military service for men in their 20s and 30s. Wait until you find out that Austrian consulates worldwide actively track male citizens and can prevent passport renewals or other services until military obligations are fulfilled, creating a bureaucratic prison that extends across continents. Think holding dual citizenship gives you flexibility? Think again. Austria doesn't recognize other nationalities when it comes to military service, treating American-Austrian dual citizens exactly the same as Vienna-born locals for draft purposes. Picture being a successful businessman in New York who's never lived in Austria, only to discover during a European vacation that you're wanted by Austrian authorities for failing to report for military service you never knew existed. The service requirement can last up to 9 months, effectively destroying careers, relationships, and life plans for men who considered themselves purely foreign nationals. Austrian authorities have detained draft dodgers at airports, wedding ceremonies, and business meetings throughout Europe, turning what should be celebratory life events into military custody situations. This law has torn apart families and ruined careers, with some Austrian-American men choosing to permanently avoid Europe rather than risk detention for military service in a country they barely know. Austrian bureaucracy operates on a medieval guild system that makes simple tasks require multiple government offices and months of waiting. Austria's administrative system preserves complexity that would make Byzantine emperors jealous, turning routine bureaucratic tasks into epic quests involving multiple agencies, specific forms, and arbitrary waiting periods. You heard right. Changing your address, registering a business, or even updating personal information requires navigating a labyrinthine system where each office handles only tiny fragments of your request and refuses to coordinate with other departments. Here's the nightmare scenario. Opening a simple business in Austria can require visits to up to 12 different government offices, each with unique hours, requirements, and personnel who act like guardians of ancient secrets rather than public servants. Wait until you find out that Austrian bureaucrats often refuse to process applications containing minor errors, forcing applicants to restart entire processes from the beginning rather than making simple corrections, turning weeks of work into months of repetitive paperwork. Think digital government services have modernized Austria? Think again. Many critical processes still require physical presence, handwritten forms, and official stamps that must be obtained during specific hours from specific offices that might be closed for random holidays you've never heard of. Picture trying to register your residence in Vienna, and discovering that you need documents from Office A to get forms from Office B to submit applications to Office C, but Office A only processes requests on Tuesdays, Office B requires appointments scheduled weeks in advance, and Office C might reject everything if your handwriting isn't sufficiently legible. This system employs thousands of bureaucrats whose primary job seems to be preventing other bureaucrats from doing their jobs efficiently, creating a parallel economy based entirely on administrative obstacles. Austrian bureaucracy has become so notorious that private companies offer specialized services just to navigate government requirements, essentially creating a shadow industry that exists solely to translate between citizens and their own government. The time and money wasted on bureaucratic inefficiency costs Austria billions annually, while driving both residents and businesses to neighboring countries with more sensible administrative systems. Austria's social courtesy rules are so complex and contradictory that locals regularly offend each other without realizing it. Austrian social etiquette operates like an invisible legal code with penalties enforced through passive-aggressive social exclusion rather than official fines, creating a society where everyone constantly violates unspoken rules they don't fully understand. You heard right. Austria has developed courtesy systems so intricate and regionally specific that even native Austrians regularly commit social violations that can damage relationships, business prospects, and community standing for years. Here's the mind-bending part. The same greeting that's considered polite in Vienna can be perceived as insulting in Salzburg, while behaviors that show respect in Tyrol might be interpreted as condescending in Graz, creating a country where social navigation requires regional expertise that takes decades to master. Wait until you find out that Austrian courtesy rules include precise timing requirements for greetings, specific language formulas for different age groups and social classes, and unwritten hierarchies that determine who speaks first, who sits where, and who pays for what in social situations. Think learning German grammar is complicated? Think again. Austrian social grammar makes linguistic rules look simple, with subtle violations that can mark you as an outsider for life, while major violations can result in complete social ostracism from entire communities. Picture moving from one Austrian region to another, and discovering that your perfectly polite behavior from your previous city is now considered rude, arrogant, or inappropriate in ways that locals will never directly explain, but will punish through social exclusion and professional discrimination. The complexity reaches absurd levels where the wrong tone of voice when saying "Grüß Gott" can communicate disrespect, where offering to pay for coffee can be insulting in some contexts but expected in others, and where the timing of small talk can determine whether business negotiations succeed or fail. This system creates constant social anxiety among Austrians themselves, who live in perpetual fear of accidentally offending someone through courtesy violations they might not even recognize. Foreign residents often describe feeling like they're performing in a play where everyone else knows the script but refuses to share it, leading to years of social isolation and professional setbacks based on invisible etiquette infractions. Number 1. Austria has successfully convinced the world that Hitler was German while claiming Mozart and Beethoven as Austrian, creating history's most successful national rebranding campaign. This is the ultimate Austrian masterstroke, a psychological operation so effective that most people don't even realize they've been manipulated by decades of careful historical revisionism and cultural marketing. You heard right. Austria has managed to export responsibility for producing history's most notorious dictator, while simultaneously claiming credit for classical music's greatest composers, creating a narrative that, honestly, just defies basic historical facts but has become accepted global truth. Here's the absolutely mind-blowing part. Adolf Hitler was born in Austria, raised in Austrian culture, developed his political ideology in Vienna, and remained an Austrian citizen for most of his early political career. Yet Austria has successfully convinced the world that he was fundamentally German, while simultaneously claiming Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who lived in the Holy Roman Empire, and considered himself European rather than specifically Austrian in the modern sense. Wait until you find out that this rebranding campaign was so successful that Austria received sympathy as Nazi Germany's first victim after World War II, despite the fact that Austrian enthusiasm for the Anschluss was often greater than German support, and Austrian participation in Nazi war crimes was proportionally higher than German participation. Think historical facts are immune to marketing? Think again. Austria has spent 7 decades crafting a cultural narrative that emphasizes Mozart's birthplace in Salzburg, while downplaying Hitler's birthplace in Braunau am Inn, creating tourist industries that celebrate Austrian musical heritage, while systematically minimizing Austrian responsibility for 20th century horrors. Picture the psychological brilliance of a country that has transformed global perceptions so completely that mentioning Hitler's Austrian origins surprises people who automatically assume he was German, while those same people can instantly identify Mozart's Austrian genius, despite the fact that the Austria Mozart knew was a completely different political entity than modern Austria. This represents perhaps the most successful national rebranding in human history, allowing Austria to inherit cultural prestige while exporting historical responsibility, creating a modern identity built on selective memory and strategic marketing rather than actual historical facts. The campaign was so effective that even historical education in many countries reinforces these misconceptions, with textbooks and documentaries that emphasize Hitler's German political career while highlighting Mozart's Salzburg connection, turning historical complexity into simplified national narratives that serve Austrian tourism and diplomatic interests. Austria essentially rewrote history through persistent cultural messaging, proving that with enough time and repetition, even the most well-documented facts can be psychologically relocated from one country to another. So we've just discovered Austria's most shocking secrets, from car confiscation laws to historical rebranding campaigns that fooled the entire world. Which one shocked you the most? Have you ever experienced Austria's bureaucratic maze or mysterious social rules firsthand? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want more mind-bending facts about countries that aren't what they seem, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more secrets to uncover.